Thank you all very much for coming. This is just a little bit interesting here because of all the people in the room, many of you, which I have held in very high esteem and have learned from you and spent time with you, and you have played a big role in coloring my career. So thank you for being here for this session. I'll also say a couple of disclaimers. What do you think? I think my bull riding days are over. I may not do that. You know, I skied in February, had a blast, went home unscathed, and here I sit before you today with this boot on my foot where I broke a bone on Easter weekend in a clumsy accident. So any of you all that have these little ledges that keep the water from running under your garage, they are evil. And do not step on them because they will trip you up. And so I've got 2 more weeks of non-weight bearing in case any of you are getting ideas that you want to email my orthopedist and say, she walked on it. Please don't do that because I did get clearance to walk across the stage to get my award this morning. So I think I'm okay with that. Then another disclaimer, you know, AONL has been fabulous to me once they learned I had a broken foot with the accommodations. And I just am so grateful for that. But when I told them, I probably will need to sit down for my talk, I did not think I'd be on a throne. So just erase those mental images from your mind and just think to yourself, well, poor thing, she had to sit down, so they gave her a seat. So I'm normally like to be down there roaming around and not this far from you, but this is what we have today, and I'm very grateful to have a place to sit and talk with you. And MT, you said this is 20 minutes? I thought it was 2 hours, no? Okay, I'll do my best to run through some things for you here. But, you know, I thought it would be good to maybe give you a little bit of context for my talk today because I think that one of the things I spend a lot of time thinking about is the people who will follow us. And, you know, have we left nursing in a place where it will thrive and it will be forever? And it will be the profession that it is intended to be for society because, you know, that's really what's important. You know, I think that all of you probably are aware that for the last bajillion years, nursing has been identified as the most honest and ethical profession. Many of you all will translate that into the most trusted profession. And all of those things are true, and I think that when you lead the most trusted profession, you have a lot of accountability as a leader to be a trusted nursing leader. And so I think that really kind of is the genesis for thinking about those people who follow us. But let me dial back just a minute and talk a little bit about how I got into this frame of mind. And here's the first story I'd like to tell you. This is my daughter, Ruthie, who, you know, is here as my, excuse me, my handler, she calls herself. Ruthie is a great help, and I was so thrilled when she told me, she said, I'm going with you. You're not going by yourself. And so I was real proud of that. But if you want to know the full story about Ruthie, it is in 2010, when she graduated from high school, she said, you know, I want to be a nurse. I want to go to nursing school. That's what she said. But if that doesn't work out, I can always go to med school. And I'm like, you know, that is right. So she stood up in front of the church, you know, because, you know, you all go to churches where they have the seniors come up and tell where they're going to college and whatnot. Well, that was her little speech. And I'm like, okay, let's see how this goes. So off she goes to school and to college, and she was a distance freestyler and went on scholarship to swim. And she came home at Christmas after her first semester, and I think we calculated they're in the water at least 5 hours a day, and she was skinny as a rail, and she was sick. And I'm thinking, yeah, that fits with the stress you're under and the things you're having to do. And so she goes back to school. And it was, you know, maybe 2 or 3 months later, she calls me one morning and says, you know, Mom, when I swallow, the water comes out my nose. And I thought, that is not good. So I found out how fast I could get from where I was to where she was, landed in the plane and We were in the ENT office within a couple of hours of when I landed. Picked her up from her dorm room. Her head was like this. Hi, Mom. I thought, this isn't good. So off we go to the ENT office, and within an hour she was in the OR with a expanded retropharyngeal cyst that was from a latent tonsillitis. And she could have died with that. And I was pretty humbled by the whole thing, so I flip into the mom mode, the mom nurse mode. You all know it well. And she did very well. The nurses came in her room and did bedside shift report like none other you have ever seen. I was like, check. We are in good hands here. So she says to me once she got, I stayed there for about a week and, made sure she got better. And she says, Mom, I will be a nurse. She said, doctors cure you, but nurses heal you. I know, I heard the moan out there. So you know what it means to be called to be a nurse. And so now I'm proud to tell you that I got to participate in her graduation. I got to pin her and give her her diploma. And there's our picture at graduation in 2016, 6 years after she graduated from high school. So, that's for one who follows me, that's pretty personal. And so the whole time I've been in practice, I've thought, I've got to leave things good for Ruthie. And by the way, there's 4 million other nurses out there that we have to leave things well for. But then along comes this one. And I'd like to introduce you to Peyton. I call her Peyton Grace. That's her name. I'm the only one that calls her that. And when she's out on the softball field, it's a mouthful to say, so I usually just call, go Peyton. But she is 14 years old, and she is a freshman in high school, just finishing up her freshman year. And she says to me about 2 or 3 months ago, because she had been on the med school track, hot and heavy. She's one of these that checks her grades every day, poor thing. And, she's very obsessed with how she does, and she had been, I want to go to med school. And I was like, okay, let's get you ready. And so, I'm thinking about who can I hook her up with to tell her what medicine's really like, and tour around the hospital and do some of those things. Well, a couple months ago, she said to me, nope, not going to med school. I want to be a nurse. I said, why do you want to be a nurse? Besides the fact that, Mom, she calls me Nina. That's my grandma name. She says, Nina, it looks like a really cool thing to do. And besides, there's nowhere else that you can make that big an impact on people's lives. I thought, you're 14, child. Breathe. Be a teenager for a little bit here, but she's got it too. And so now you can see there's her picture with cleats and then her picture without cleats. And she is on the same track. And so you can see this is really personal to me. The fact that here are these 2 women in my lives that now I've got 2 of them that I want to leave nursing well for. And I bet every one of you in this room are sitting there thinking of pictures of people in your own world that you're thinking, yeah, I was part of their becoming a nurse. Or I have a commitment for nursing to go well so that they have as fabulous a career as I do. Maybe they're your sons or daughters or your grandchildren. And all of those things are the emotional attachment for us. But you know what? As I said earlier, there's 4 million of us out there. And there are a lot of people that are looking to every one of you and in terms of helping them to set their career as a nurse. And so I think it's that accountability that I think a lot about. Now, I talked to a group of the AONL faculty on Sunday, so I apologize if any of you all are in the room. You're going to get to see a slide twice, but don't shout anything out, okay? Because this is a slide I think about a lot. This was the very first patient in Emory Healthcare that we proned. And this is a slide from Emory St. Joseph's Hospital, who has just submitted, for my magnet commissioner friends over here, they've just submitted their 7th document for their 7th designation. And they were the number 3 organization in the country to become magnet. And so we made this picture in the ICU. And, when I show this picture to people, I ask them, what do you see? And most people look at that and they say, I see focus. I see people very committed to safety. I see a team. Because not all of these are nurses. There's probably some respiratory therapists there. I hope it's a respiratory therapist up there managing that tube. And you know, you see a lot of different roles in there in this slide. But one of the things about this slide, and if you look really closely, look about the middle of the slide. Does anybody see a hand? Look at the bottom of the slide, your far left. Do you see toes? And that's a patient. And every one of those people are doing the work that they're doing on behalf of that patient. And I think that what the important thing about this is that we got really good during the pandemic, what we call pivoting. You know, we wear a gown this way one day and another way the next day, and take it off and put it on different, you know, all of the changes that we made, we were really good at pivoting. We were really good at team. We were really good at being very focused on what was right for the patient, following the evidence that we had at hand. And when you think about moving beyond this now, I would bet you that if I took inventory of the people in that slide, there's only half of them still in Emory Healthcare. I mean, I'm not implying that they perished, but more that they may have said, I think I'm going to retire, or I think I need a break, or I think I'm going to go somewhere where I can make a lot more money. If I'm going to be this miserable, I need to go somewhere to get paid a lot of money for it. And so a lot of different emotions came around that. But what I would say to you is that we now are in this place where we no longer need to pivot as much as adapting our organization for the complexity that we're currently dealing with, because it is broad and it is deep. And so when we think about complexity, you think about the fact that we nurses are relational people. We understand things relationally. We interpret things relationally. We thrive in relationships. If any of you have ever tried to build a nursing unit and get rid of the nurses station, what a mistake. Because people want to come together and be with each other. We are relational in what we do and how we do it. And so when you think of an organization that has had so much complexity and so much depletion, now it's about restoring some of the relational opportunities and aspects in the care that we give, which calls on us as leaders to be relational leaders. And you think about the fact that nursing is an adaptive challenge in this whole thing, because an adaptive challenge is something that where you solve problems that call for a change in your attitude, in your behaviors, and in your beliefs. And so now we're in this phase of adapting. And so for us to leave nursing well, we have to adapt. And I use that word intentionally rather than using the word change, because change to me is something yesterday and something different tomorrow. Whereas adapting is more carrying the right things forward and seeing them in a new form, with a new belief, with a new behavior. And so it's that nursing in its relational state, with its ability to adapt, is an important part for those that follow us. I will also tell you that I did a little word cloud here. This is another chat AI, Ruthie. You've got to be impressed that your mother's figured that one out. But when you think about the fact that you can put compassion in this chat AI and look at the word cloud that comes from that. When I read a book once that was called Robot Proof. And in that book it said that nursing will never be much of a victim of artificial intelligence, because of the fact that we do our work through compassion and empathy, which is something that robots haven't yet been able to replicate. And so when you think about the fact that our relational tendencies with our grounding foundationally in compassion, it really does help us to see that solving problems takes new learning. Solving problems takes innovation. Solving problems takes new patterns of behavior. All of these things anchored in relationships and compassion. And so I would think that we as leaders then have to think, are my behaviors, beliefs, corresponding with that? And so when you think about this, I know I put the word change up there, but I really think the thing that does need to change, leave this one behind, that nursing is part of a healthcare infrastructure? No. Nursing is part of the value of that infrastructure. Nursing is where the value gets generated in that infrastructure. And in order to do that, it's important that we change a few things that have been our traditional mindsets. Now, at Emory Healthcare, we went live with Epic last October. And I love Epic. I think it's a fabulous system. But there's this one little thing about it that I kind of resist, and that is they have a task list. Do you know what I'm talking about? That becomes how nurses define themselves as, did you complete your task list? Well, hold on. That task list is an enabler. It's not who you are. That task list is a tool. That task list is just one element of what you do and what you use in order to provide patient care. And what's really important are the outcomes. And so the thing to change is leave infrastructure behind, replace it with value, leave task lists behind, replace it with what outcomes did you produce today? What were the outcomes and the efforts of your work? The second arrow there is one that may be a bit controversial in this room, so I'll take a deep breath and also thank my colleague Debbie Hatmaker, who always helps me think through these things in a politically correct way. Is that I do not believe nursing is a head count. I believe nursing is both about having correct numbers in place, so there's enough eyes on patients, but it's also about the knowledge to interpret what you see and do something about it. And so I'm so anxious to leave ratios and head counts behind, because if I have friends here, because if we don't, we will constrain ourselves, and the innovation needed to take nursing forward and leave it well for those who follow us will be constrained. Because the innovation that comes forward will be limited in how we can move and how we can decide what nursing will be moving forward. I am positively sure that there's no one at CMS right now trying to decide, how do I pay hospitals more? And so I think that we're going to have to think about the fact that whatever we morph into with our systems related to compensation will be systems that we have to remove money in one place in order to put it in another. And I know that for sure, because, while in the ambulatory setting there's a lot of revenue nurses are generating because they're able to bill for what they do. But I think that as quickly as we can shift our thinking into how nurses are knowledge workers and how we as leaders don't manage them, they're our peers. Nurses are our peers. And we're in a relationship where we're leading together. And you as the leader are in that position where you create the platform for some of that leadership to work. And then finally, I would say on this bottom arrow, it says, we're really responsible for both the clinical and the financial outcomes that result from good nursing practice. And that comes from really being able to articulate at the very unit level that yes, I prevented that CLABSI, and yes, I avoided $40,000 in additional cost. So therefore, that goes straight to the net revenue bottom line, and that is my value today. And I think we can't abandon those things. We've got to always think about them. And so we as leaders must be flexible. We must be adaptable ourselves. We must be open-minded so that our teams can innovate. I mean, you think about those people who follow us, that's our future. And I think that what's important here is to teach them the very keen importance of what I call platforms. And platforms are places where you actually engage and interact with clinical nurses to understand as a leader what's important to them, what are the things that they know and tell you about that would stimulate you to change the entire nursing strategy of the organization because of what you learned from that front line, from that platform. Now, some of our platforms look like professional governance. Some of our platforms look like a shift huddle. Some of our platforms can look many different ways, whatever suits the clinical nurses that are doing the work. And so I would say to you all, this is who's really important here. And do you have the platforms to know what are the things that they're challenged with and what are the things that are important to them that we need to know and understand? I would also say that it's always important to just pause and ask yourself, how do I lead? Because if you really look back in the 80s, which was 10 years after I became a nurse, when the original magnet study was done, that was a nursing shortage that stimulated a group of researchers from the American Academy of Nursing to travel around the country and observe and study hospitals who had better than average recruitment and retention of nurses. And when they studied that, they found 5 things: how we lead, how we make decisions, do nurses practice with autonomy in an environment of professionalism, do you advance the science, and do you measure in order to improve? And if you look at the magnet model today, those are the 5 things in that model. And they have stood the test of time. You all know, if you were at the Magnet CNO luncheon, that we're embarking on a study of the model just to revalidate, is the evidence still support that type of model? And what about it needs to be stated differently or viewed differently? But those are the things that are incredibly important. So when you see this slide and it says how we lead, what I love about this slide is this is a celebration done in one of the units at Emory. And the CNO is in there, and unless you're one of the CNOs at Emory, which are on this side of the room, you will know that you cannot find the CNO because they are embedded with that team. So we lead from within. We don't lead from above. The bureaucratic ways of leadership are gone and replaced with our relational ability to lead and our ability to lead from within a group of professionals who are our peers. And I think what's also important to ask ourselves is, can we grow and learn as a nurse? And are we part of something bigger than ourselves? And so instead of when you wander around and talk to nurses in whatever setting, you're not the one there telling them what to do. You're the one there saying, asking questions, Karen, instead of telling. You're saying, what do you find difficult or challenging? Because that's your platform in order to gather information and know how to translate that back into the strategic priorities of an organization. I think the other thing too is for nurses to be able to know their value. It's such an important part of their professional identity. Throughout the last 3 years, particularly in 2020, when we had to do a lot of moving people around fast because patients were coming from everywhere, we had to do things that maybe stripped nurses out of environments where their professional identity was reinforced. Yes, today you're an ER nurse, but tomorrow I need you to go to the ICU. How will your skills translate there? And what part of that identity did we disrupt? And it's so critically important now that nurses have that professional identity. You can see the little signs that these nurses are holding up because they know who they are. They know what's important to them to reinforce that identity. And you all heard me say up on the stage a little earlier, one of the things I want you to remember is when nursing goes well, the rest will follow. I'll tell you a quick story. That actually has an Emory story attached to it, so CNOs from Emory, sorry, you got to hear this again. This was actually in a ceremony that we have at Emory called the Emory Medal Ceremony, where a medal is given every year to an Emory graduate who does something really cool in healthcare. They work at Emory Healthcare. In this particular year, we had 3 nurses who were getting the Emory Medal because of their contributions during the Ebola outbreak and the care they gave to a patient in our special communicable disease unit. And there was also this physician who was getting the award. And he was a really famous physician that had done so much and contributed greatly to medicine. And about 2 weeks before the Emory Medal ceremony, he died. And his son was going to receive the award for him in his behalf. So his son goes to his house and looks at his study, and there he finds the speech his father had written to receive the Emory Medal. And so the son brought the speech to the ceremony and read it. And he went through many things, thanking many people. Because when you get one of these awards that has lifetime in it, you certainly are very gracious and very reflective of the things that the people who have helped you along your career and the people that have been part of your success. And so he read that whole story that his father had written, and at the very end he said, if there are any physicians in the audience tonight, I want you to hear this. Never mistreat a nurse. Always make a nurse your partner. Always listen to what they have to say, because many times they know things you don't. Because I know this to be true, that when nursing goes well, the rest will follow. And I think that that's such a powerful message to me, because you look at any organization and look at the lifeblood that our society cannot do without nurses. And we're so important, just not only to society, but to our organizations and to all the many people that depend on nurses to be the most trusted, ethical, honest people in our roles. We've had a lot of disruption. We have a lot of people who are in nursing right now for the wrong reasons, but I would bet you at their heart, at their core, there's many of them who want to come back, want to be back, want to be in a different situation. So create the platforms and know that when those platforms exist, you will have the best insight as to what's important to clinical nurses. So those are all my remarks. There's my email. I always want people to have email availability, so that if there's things you think about, send me an email, ask me a question, let's carry on the conversation. And notice on this last slide that I show you today, those nurses have emerged from their mask and life goes on. These are 3 of our fabulous clinical nurse specialists at Emory, and I think that one of the things that you could say about each of them is they have made tremendous contributions to reducing many of our nurse-sensitive adverse events across the entire enterprise. So thank you for coming to the session today. I know that we've got some time here to have some Q&A, and I'm happy to do that. I've got to give the guys a minute to turn off the video. And as soon as they do that, they're going to put some mics in the aisle. And I love your comments, your feedback, your thoughts. What things are most important for those who follow us? Thank you.